The New York Mets beat the Los Angeles Dodgers on Wednesday night as Jacob DeGrom was absolutely brilliant. Starling Marte hit a 2-run homer, and Brandon Nimmo made the catch of the year. I'll be talking about that game in the first segment today. Then we're going to go back in time and revisit the last time that DeGrom started against the Dodgers because a lot has changed in 3 years. And we'll close out the show today talking a little bit about some injury news. Brett Baty looks to be out for the season with a thumb injury.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Vroom. With Vroom, you can buy a car entirely online and have it delivered straight to you, so you never have to go to a dealership again. So next time you need to buy a car, just grab your phone, go to vroom.com, and check out thousands of great cars. It was an awesome game to watch on Wednesday night here. A pitcher's duel between Jacob DeGrom and Tyler Anderson. I know we can go negative here and talk about the offense that only scored 2 runs and how they're coming up short in that facet, because certainly they are. Still, though, Tyler Anderson was really good in this game. And I want to focus on the positives. And the positive, for one, Jacob DeGrom, I know we've said it, but fully back, fully dominant. He's the best pitcher in baseball. And we always knew this. But when you don't see him for over a year, you tend to wonder, what's it going to look like when he comes back? And I'll tell you, 7 innings pitched against the best lineup in baseball right now, 3 hits allowed, 1 earned run on a Mookie Betts homer. And Mookie Betts has hit 32 of them now this year. Pretty damn good hitter to give up a homer to if you are going to allow a long ball. Only had 1 walk, 9 strikeouts, ERA on the season at 1.98. Today threw 93 pitches, 62 for strikes. I'm sure if the game warranted some more pitches, he might have gone back out there. But, at 93 pitches, gone through 7, I think that's about where you want Jacob DeGrom at this point. And, maybe they'll get him over 100 at some point before the end of the season, but I don't necessarily think that matters. Jacob DeGrom can do a lot more with 95 pitches than most guys can do with 110. And not a lot of guys are even going that deep in the game. So I would have loved to see DeGrom go out and hand the ball directly to Edwin Diaz. I was nervous with Adam Ottavino coming out there, but Ottavino was amazing. Was able to get through the teeth of that order, or at least the beginning of it. Edwin Diaz had to come on and face Trey Turner and Freddie Freeman, but getting Mookie Betts out for Ottavino was certainly a tough task, and he proved to be up to it. Got 2 strikeouts in his inning, and Edwin Diaz came on with Timmy Trumpet playing him onto the field in an electric Citi Field crowd, and he got the job done. Got a couple grounders and a strikeout. Nice, easy 1-2-3 inning of work. Perfect bullpen work from the Mets' best 2 relievers tonight. And, Jacob DeGrom gives you the other 7. You look at his starts so far this year. August 2nd, first start, 5 innings pitched, 1 run allowed. Next start against the Braves, 5 2/3, 2 runs allowed. 6 scoreless against the Phillies. Gave up 3 runs against the Braves in 6 2/3. Had his start last time against the Rockies where he went 6 innings, allowed a run, and now up to 7 innings with tonight's performance. But it could have been a different game for Jacob DeGrom. Jacob DeGrom wins his 4th game here, but there was certainly an opportunity for him to end up with a no decision, because there was a fly out. What inning was it exactly? Now I'm trying to find it. It was the 7th. So I figured it was the 7th. It felt like an inning ending out, and that's why I missed it when I was first scrolling through the box score here. I'm like, didn't that end the inning? There was still a strikeout after that, but it was so emphatic, the play that Nimmo made, that it just felt like that was what got the Mets off the field, because in a lot of respects it did, to avoid damage here for Jacob DeGrom. But Justin Turner nearly takes him deep, right center field. Brandon Nimmo runs back, leaps, perfectly timed it, shades of Andy Chavez, reaching over the fence to grab it, all in one motion. There's some home run robberies where, an outfielder will get back to the fence. There's a lot of hang time. They time their jump, they leap up, they make the catch, and you applaud it. Those plays like Andy Chavez and the one that Nimmo just made, where you have to, in full, stride, leap and catch it, those are tough plays to make. And Nimmo, I wouldn't say made it look easy, because that was nowhere close to an easy play out there. But uh, he made a beautiful catch. I don't really know how to describe it other than to say, watch it. Like, watch that play. And I know I'll be watching it on loop tonight, because I can't get enough of it. The way he not only made the catch, but came down with that energy, with that roar to him, which we've seen a little bit of Nimmo this year, which is a little bit out of character. It's showing not necessarily an arrogance, but a confidence that, yeah, this is a good baseball team that's playing in front of a raucous crowd that, feels the stakes of a game against a team like the Dodgers, and knows that this is going to be a team you're going to face in the playoffs, most likely. I mean, the only way the Mets don't see the Dodgers in the playoffs is if they both get buys and somebody upsets them in the NLDS. And, the Braves are certainly capable. I don't see any other team beating the Dodgers in that round other than the Mets or the Braves. So if the Phillies end up matching up against the Braves and they somehow win a wild card series, I can't see them beating the Dodgers. If it's the Padres, if it's the Brewers, any of those teams, they end up in the NLDS against the Dodgers, I do not think they could beat them. And that would eventually mean that the Mets could be seeing the Dodgers in an NLCS. I think that's kind of the collision course that we're about to see here. The Braves are that other team that's on the same level as these two. But anytime you get a win against this Dodgers team, you got to be really proud of it. And the combination of events, Marte hitting the 2-run homer, Nimmo making that catch, and the way Jacob DeGrom looked through 7 innings, not to mention the bullpen in this game, that is a win you really hang your hat on. Even up this series, got an opportunity in the go-away day here, where you can win one. 4:00 start in that game. It's Bassett, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mets pitching probables. Yes, Bassett Kershaw. So Chris Bassett on the hill against a really good Dodgers team. We know that he had some mixed results against them earlier in LA this season. We'll see how it fares this time. It wasn't a terrible start, but it did give up, I think it was 3 earned runs. So now we'll see if he can fare a little bit better. Maybe this lineup can wake up a little bit. Kershaw, not an easy draw, but he is coming off the IL, so not sure what kind of pitch limit he might be on, how deep he'll go into that game. And if you can get into the underbelly of a really good Dodgers bullpen where Jake Reed, all of a sudden, of all the guys, has come on the last 2 days and shut down the Mets. Pretty frustrating to see he's been the reliever they've consistently called on, allowing some of their other guys to get some rest after they were taxed in that Marlins series. But what a baseball game tonight. Huge win for the Mets. And the last time Jacob DeGrom pitched against the Dodgers, the Mets got a victory. But it was a very interesting one. There's a lot of layers to that game that I want to discuss. It's a Throwback Thursday, so I wanted to go back in time a little bit to 2019, the last time DeGrom squared off against LA. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But if you're one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned, think again, okay? You might think, what's the worst thing that could happen? You end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Well, you're wrong. The truth is your reaction time slows way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different, drive high, get a DUI. So I was looking today, I was curious. Did Jacob DeGrom face the Dodgers last year? He did not. Obviously, 2020 season, the Mets only played teams on the East Coast. They did not face the Dodgers. So I'm like, all right, 2019. When's the last time that DeGrom went up against this Dodgers team? Because if you remember the kind of the arc of Jacob DeGrom's career, there's been some tent poles, right? Some moments that you go back to if that's where DeGrom became DeGrom. And to me, even though you have a rookie of the year season and you have his first All-Star appearance of 2015, where He struck out the side on 10 pitches. There was a lot of moments that led up to the playoffs that year, but Jacob DeGrom became Jacob DeGrom game 5 of the NLDS, where he did not have his best stuff, and he just found his way to gut through it. The reason the Mets won that series, and that really was kind of the difference, that was the series that was the toughest. They steamrolled the Cubs, and then the Royals were not as good of a team as the Dodgers were. But the Mets just ended up coming short in that World Series. But to beat the Dodgers was an incredible feat in that playoff run. And there's a couple of players you really look towards. Obviously, Daniel Murphy began his heroics. I think they got obviously Michael Conforto had the homers off Kershaw, and there was a lot of different contributors. But the two that stand out to me, it's Jacob DeGrom, game 1 and game 5, and it was Jeurys Familia, because he was incredible in that series. The pitching the Mets got. So that's one of those moments where Jacob DeGrom started to become Jacob DeGrom. And I always like to see him go against this Dodgers team because they're always really good and it's always a tough matchup. The last time he faced the Dodgers was September 14th, 2019. That date is significant for one main reason. To me, it's my birthday. I turned 24 on September 14th, 2019. And that was also my first year hosting Locked On Mets. I actually remember this game very vividly. I think I was on a family trip in Indiana at the time. But this was a battle of Cy Young contenders. It was Hyun-Jin Ryu, who was the ERA leader and ended up finishing the year with the ERA title. And it was Jacob DeGrom. And they went head-to-head, and they pitched to a draw. 7 scoreless innings for both, 8 strikeouts for DeGrom, 6 for Ryu. Ends up going until the bullpens that ended up deciding that game. Seth Lugo pitched a really good 8th inning. Bottom of the 8th, you know what happened? The Mets scored 3 runs. How do you think they scored those runs? Rajay Davis hit a bases clearing double that meant the difference in that game. The Mets win 3-0. And I think it was Justin Wilson. Yeah, came on for the save. What was crazy to me, though, the reason why I really wanted to talk about this more than it being my birthday or the Cy Young battle, although all that was cool. And obviously that was the first game. DeGrom goes 7 scoreless in each of his last 3 starts to win that Cy Young. Ryu gave up 3 runs in his second to last start. That might have cost him, although I think all the advanced metrics bore out that DeGrom was the best pitcher in the NL that season. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is that Mets team in 2019, they were in the mix for the playoffs. Okay, they were a good team, very solid. You know what their starting lineup was on September 14th in the thick of a playoff race? Now, they had a great pitching. They did. They had DeGrom. They had Zach Wheeler. They had Noah Syndergaard. They had Marcus Stroman. And Steven Matz was having a good season as well. A great 5-man rotation. You know what the starting lineup was, though, that night? Med Rosario at shortstop. I think Francisco Lindor, slight upgrade there. JD Davis in left field, batting second. Jeff McNeil, your third hitter, in right field. And by the way, Jeff McNeil, as a right fielder, was by far the best defensive player on this roster at the time, or at least in this starting lineup I'm looking at. Pete Alonso at first, Wilson Ramos catching, Robinson Cano at second, Todd Frazier at third, Juan Lagares in center field. And this isn't Gold Glove Juan Lagares. This is Juan Lagares on his way out. Okay, that was when he was still above average, but not elite defensively by any stretch. And then you had Jacob DeGrom batting ninth, obviously. That team's not good. Like, in comparison, just go position by position. Lindor compared to Ahmed Rosario, huge upgrade. Mark Canha to JD Davis, huge upgrade. Defensively and offensively, in my opinion. I know JD Davis had a good year that season, but overall. Right field, Jeff McNeil. Well, now he's playing in his correct position at second base where he's even more elite defensively. Instead, Starling Marte hit a 2-run homer for DeGrom tonight. Pete Alonso, the only identical piece playing the same position and hitting in the same spot in the lineup. Wilson Ramos, you could say, better offensive option than a James McCann or a Tomas Nido. Nido obviously started tonight, but Wilson Ramos was terrible defensively. And so I promise you, the way he was hurting you defensively did not outweigh the value he was bringing you offensively. Cano and Frazier, both at that point about ready to retire, or at least on the road to it. I mean, Frazier was decent that season, but certainly not a great player. I will say, I guess, Eduardo Escobar and Todd Frazier, if you want to call that a push, you could. But, the McNeil Cano comparison, there's no contest. And then, Brandon Nimmo, for whatever reason, I don't remember if he probably was hurt at that point. That was middle of September. But Juan Lagares to Brandon Nimmo, or maybe because you had the lefty Ryu on the mound, maybe they went to Lagares. That's probably more likely. Still, Lagares to Nimmo, I mean, no question there. And the fact that Nimmo has now learned how to hit left-handed pitching to be able to be an everyday center fielder. It's just a way better baseball team now than then. It really shows you kind of the difference, right, of where the Mets were then, what the Mets are now. And now I didn't pull this before, but now I'm just vastly curious what their record was on September 14th. We can even go back to August 31st. That year, the Mets that were in the thick of the playoff race, right? They were in it for a wild card, if you recall. They were 13 games back. They were 69 and 66 in the middle of a good season. Now, they finished that year 86 and 76. At the time, I was like, this is one of the best Mets seasons I've enjoyed in a long time. Now, the team is about to get into September with 83 wins, 3 wins away from their total that entire season. They are suddenly 83 and 48 as compared to what they were the last time Jacob DeGrom started against the Dodgers, where he was pitching on a ball club when they won that game that went to 77 and 71, 6 games over. So the Mets are in just so much better shape now than they were all those years ago. And so for Throwback Thursday, I thought it would be an interesting segment to look back at where they were to really appreciate where they are. But we got some injury news to discuss. Brett Baty done for the year. Very unfortunate. Going to talk about that injury in just a minute. But first, a word from our sponsors. So the New York Mets will be without Brett Baty for the remainder of the season as he has a UCL tear in his right thumb that will require surgery. He'll get that tomorrow. But the timetable on that to return is about 5 weeks. This is a hitter that still hadn't got his feet under him at the big league level, hitting 184, 244 on base, 342 slugging. Did have a couple of nice home runs and showed some flashes. He's going to be a huge part of the team next year. Would not be shocked at all if he was the starting third baseman on opening day. And, he had a great season in Double-A. But by the time he could be available to come back, you might already be in the playoffs. You probably would already be in the playoffs. And outside of another injury opening up a spot for him, you're not going to force him onto a playoff roster. He was there in place of Luis Guillorme. Luis Guillorme is expected to begin rehab on Sunday from that groin injury. So if all goes well, maybe not this weekend, next weekend at the absolute earliest, maybe the beginning of next week, you could see Guillorme back into the fold. And in the meantime, you're just going to see a lot of Eduardo Escobar, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. Get him some more playing time. You can see some at-bats from both sides of the dish. Luckily, in this series, you got a lot of right-handed Eduardo Escobar. He doubled tonight. And you look at the infielders on this roster now, it's basically just starters. Like, there's no bench options when it comes to your infielders at the moment. They're just going real tight with this roster. You got Alonso, you got Escobar, you got Lindor, you got McNeil. That's your starting infield, right? Then you got Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelbach. Both guys that are only going to play first base in the infield. And Vogelbach's not going to play any position. He's just a DH at this point. I guess some of the other option for the Mets, if there was an injury, you go back to Mark Hanna. And Mark Hanna is the emergency third baseman. They have coverage at first. And I would imagine Mark Hanna would be the emergency second baseman if they needed him. Or maybe he'd go to third and Escobar would slide to second. But I think the idea here is the Mets are going to try to get through this next week as is, although they do have call-ups tomorrow. So actually, now I'm thinking about it, they'll probably get somebody up here that can play, multiple positions. If it's Kosuke Kato, if he's still in Syracuse. Let's look over the Syracuse roster real quick here and identify who we would imagine will be up. Travis Blankenhorn, an option. He can give you some third and some second. Kosuke Kato, JT Riddle. Yomar Sanchez is back with the Mets after being outrighted to AAA Syracuse. They could get Don back up. They could get Palka up, but neither of them would do much for their positional flexibility. So I imagine that we're looking at any of those guys we've seen this year in Cato, Devin Marrero, JT Riddle, Yomar Sanchez, maybe Blankenhorn to give you a defensive option as the rosters expand. And they called up Terrence Gore today to be that pinch hitter, or pinch runner, excuse me. I don't want him hitting. The guy for his career is a 224 hitter with 325 on base percentage and a 284 slugging percentage. But he's been on some playoff rosters because of his speed. Won 2 World Series, one with the Royals, one with the Braves last year. And the idea of adding him today is you want him on your playoff roster. I think this, you want him as an option. And by adding him today, you have given yourself that option. They could have gone with Travis Jankowski. I think they like Gore speed a little bit more. So he has a specialized role for this Mets team, and that's why he got called up. But overall, don't expect to see too much of him. The bottom line here, the Mets are going to try to get through this week, and then it'll be the same team that they had right out of the deadline there with Guillorme and Escobar at third, and the obvious everyday infielders with Lindor, McNeil, and Alonso. In the outfield, it's going to be Canna, it's going to be Nimmo, it's going to be Martin. You got Naquin, Vogelback, and Ruff as your bench with the backup catcher. I mean, that's basically where the Mets are, and I think that's still certainly good enough. Now, the only other injury notes to discuss here, you got Drew Smith, who is close behind for his rehab assignment. You have Tyler McGill, who will start a rehab assignment tomorrow. So that's exciting to think about the possibility of him coming back. And Joe Lucchesi has been throwing the ball well in his rehab from Tommy John. He's getting multiple days off in between each appearance. He's only going 1 inning. That could either be simply because of the rehab process, and really that is the main reason right now. But it does open the door if you kind of think about the future, like could Joe Lucchesi be a left-handed option out of the bullpen for the playoffs? It's a possibility. I certainly like his curve coming out of the pen compared to Joely Rodriguez, whose best pitch is his changeup. I think that you could see that and say, Rodriguez hasn't been great this year. Maybe Lucchesi can fill that role. And I would not be surprised if at some point down the stretch, we see him, at first probably getting some real work in AAA Syracuse. And if he fares well there, you never know. But that is really where you're at when it comes to the injuries for the Mets. Drew Smith, Tyler McGill, the next guys that can impact that bullpen. Lucchesi a little bit further behind. Gore up in the big league club. Imagine some infielder will be up tomorrow as a September call-up. And other than that, that's pretty much where you are at with this Mets team as they enter this final month of the regular season. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you file, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. On tomorrow's show, recapping the final game of this series and doing a little bit of farm talk for a Friday Farm Report. We'll be talking some Mets prospects as always. Make sure you file, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.